Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are really getting into one of the most recognized figures in global history, Walt Disney. I mean, his impact on modern popular entertainment, completely undeniable.
It absolutely is. But the man himself, the figure behind the mouse in the Magic Kingdom, he remains intensely complex, often quite polarizing, actually.
Right. You look at the Walt Disney Company today, theme parks all over the globe, massive media acquisitions, this incredibly iconic filmography, and you realize he built something truly singular.
That's exactly it. And our mission here in this deep dive is to use the sources we have to go beyond that sort of gloss public, the beloved and her persona.
We need to dig into the harder stuff, the uncomfortable truths.
Yeah, his difficult personality for sure, his pioneering artistic work, of course, but also the political controversies that really marked his later years, and just how his relentless ambition took him from drawing cartoons in Kansas City to, believe it or not, planning utopian cities governed like a private company.
So we're really setting the stage for a look at a life defined by extreme. You've got this immense success on one hand, and then this equally immense personal complexity on the other. We should probably start right at the beginning, shouldn't we? Those formative years that kind of shaped his drive and maybe so a difficult character too.
Absolutely. Let's do that. Walt Disney was born December 5th, 1901 in Chicago, Illinois, in the Hermosa district. And his family background, it was very mobile.
Always moving.
Pretty much. His father, Elias Disney, was of Irish descent. His family had actually come over trying to cash in on the California gold rush that didn't work out, so they ended up farming in Kansas. Elias himself, he worked on the railways, then became a building contractor in Chicago.
And his mother, Flora Call.
Flora Call, yes. She had English and German heritage. Walt was the fourth of 5 kids, 3 older brothers, Herbert, Raymond, and Roy, and then a younger sister, Ruth.
But, like you said, not a stationary childhood. There's a really defining move quite early on, wasn't there?
There was. Apparently, there was a robbery on their street in Chicago, Tripp Avenue, and Elias, who the sources describe as, deeply pious, quite a conservative Christian.
Right.
He just became convinced the city was corrupting. He didn't want his kids growing up in that environment. So the whole family packed up and relocated to a 40-acre farm outside a small town called Marceline, Missouri.
Trying to find that pastoral ideal, maybe?
Something like that. But it didn't last long for everyone. The older brothers, Herbert and Raymond, they found farm life way too hard and headed back to the city pretty quickly.
And the moving didn't stop there for the rest of them.
Nope. By 1911, they moved again, this time to Kansas City. Elias had managed to buy the delivery rights for the Kansas City Star newspaper. And this period is really where Walt's famous work ethic, or maybe, his lifelong feelings about labor, really got forged.
Yeah, the sources describe a routine for Walt and his brother Roy. That sounds just grueling.
Oh, it was brutal. They were waking up shortly after 4 a.m. every single day, 7 days a week, to deliver newspapers, and then they'd go to school. So you combine that constant moving, the sheer exhaustion from the work. It's no surprise Walt struck. His grades were apparently quite poor.
But there's an irony there, isn't there? Because that tough, itinerant youth, the long hours, sort of inadvertently pushed him towards the thing that would define his life.
Exactly. Despite the bad grades, he found a real escape and developed a real skill in drawing. Started doing cartoon production, selling little sketches to neighbors, friends for a few cents here and there.
It's also important, I think, to place Disney's emergence in the context of what was happening in entertainment globally back then. It was changing rapidly.
Historically, entertainment was live, right?
Yeah.
You had theater, circuses, maybe Buffalo Bill's Wild West show touring around.
Spectacles.
Yeah. But by the mid-19th century, you start getting these technological breaks. Suddenly, you can record moving images. You can turn them into videos, into film.
And Hollywood becomes the place for this new art form. Why there specifically?
Well, initially, it was mostly practical. You needed tons of natural sunlight to expose the film stock back then. Hollywood had that in spades. Plus, nice weather, pleasant place to live. So the industry just kind of gravitated there.
And at the same time, animation starts to stir. People figuring out how to make newspaper cartoons move.
Right. Adapting those sequential drawings that were already super popular in print. And it happened earlier than you might. The first sort of major hand-drawn animated film.
Phantasmagoria.
That's the one, by Emile Call, a French cartoonist. That came out way back in 1908. Walt Disney was only 6 years old then.
Incredible. The basic technology for his life's work was already emerging when he was just a kid on a farm in Missouri.
Okay, so let's jump forward a bit. It's 1917 now. The Disney family, believe it or not, moves back to Chicago again.
Why back?
Elias had managed to get significant shares and even a board seat in a company called Ozell. They made apple juice and jelly.
Okay. And Walt, meanwhile, he's getting restless, isn't he? Drawing cartoons for his high school paper, McKinley High. But World War I is raging.
And he's desperate to join up. But he's too young. He only turned 16 in December 1917.
So what does he do? This tells you a lot about his character, I think.
It really does. He's determined. He gets hold of his birth certificate, forges the date to make himself seem older, and manages to enlist in the Red Cross Corps.
Just decides to break the rules to get what he wants. A pattern.
Perhaps. Shows that ambition, that decisiveness right from the start. Anyway, he gets shipped off to Europe, arrives in November 1918.
Just as the war ends.
Exactly. The armistice had just been signed, but his skills were still useful. He spent his time over there drawing cartoons for the U.S. Army newspaper, the Stars and Stripes.
And then he comes home in 1919, back to Kansas City. And this is where he makes arguably the most important connection of his entire career.
Absolutely crucial. He meets a biographer.
Tell us about that. How did they meet?
Walt got a job as a drawer, basically an illustrator, at a place called the Pesman Rubin Commercial Art Show. And working there was another young cartoonist, Ubi Ert Iwerks. He later shortened his name, Ub Iwerks.
And they clicked?
Iwerks apparently had a pretty tough upbringing himself. His father had abandoned the family, so maybe there was some shared understanding there, but mostly they bonded over their absolute love for drawing and animation.
The sources really emphasize this dynamic, don't they? Walt as the sort of visionary, the salesman, the driving force.
And Iwerks as the technical and artistic powerhouse, especially in those early...
He made things possible.
He really did. Iwerks was a genuine technical innovator. He figured out how to hook up a motor to an animation camera, which made the whole painstaking process of shooting animation frames much, much simpler and fast. Huge deal back.
So they started their own little studio.
They did. Took on commercial work, like for the Kansas City Slide newspaper company. But the key thing, the thing you absolutely cannot forget, is that Iwerks was the person who designed the character of Mickey Mouse.
Wow. So Iwerks provides the art, the technique.
And Walt provides the relentless ambition, the drive. And it was Walt, in the summer of 1923, who made the big leap. He decided they had to go west to Hollywood.
Why Hollywood? Obviously the film industry.
That was number one. It was the undisputed heart of American filmmaking. He knew he had to be there. But there was a second reason, too, a family connection.
His brother Roy.
Right. Roy had already moved out to California. He had a mild case of tuberculosis, apparently, and was hoping the warmer, drier climate would help him.
So Walt lands in Hollywood, connects with Roy, and they set up shop. The Disney Brothers studio initially.
That was the first name, yeah. Walt's creative energy quickly put him in charge operationally, though, and it wasn't long before the name changed. Crucially, they convinced Iwerks to pack up and join them out there.
And that collaboration starts to bear fruit.
It does. Their first real success was a series called the Alice Comics. These were pretty innovative for the time. They mixed live-action footage of a real little girl, Alice, with cartoon characters instead. Technically, quite tricky back then.
And they arrived just as the whole industry was about to be turned upside down by sound.
Perfect timing, in a way. Silent films were dominant, but the talkies films with synchronized speech and music, they first appeared commercially in 1927. Animation wasn't far behind. They jumped on sound technology in the late 20s, and dialogue became standard in cartoons through the 90s.
But before the massive success of Mickey Mouse, there was a significant failure, wasn't there? The whole Oswald the Lucky Rabbit situation.
Ah, yes, the Oswald debacle. A painful but very important lesson for Walt. It started when a distributor named Charles Mintz, who ran Winkler Pictures, told Disney that Universal Pictures wanted to get into the cartoon.
So Disney needed a character.
Right. They apparently kicked around an idea for a cat character, but decided cats were too common in cartoons already. So they came up with Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, black and white, long ears. You can definitely see him as a direct prototype for...
And Oswald was successful.
The first short, poor Papa, got the second one, Trolley Trouble, hit the mark. Universal ordered a whole series, 27 Oswald shorts.
So the studio must have been doing pretty well financially then.
They were. It brought in good money. The staff grew to about 20 people. Walt and Roy actually felt confident enough to invest some profits in oil drilling on the side. And Iwerks even had his own little side business selling specialized animation inks and paint. Things looked solid.
But then came the contract negotiation.
Exactly. Early 1928, Walt heads to New York. He's hoping to negotiate a better profit margin for the next batch of Oswald cartoons. He felt they deserved more.
And he gets a shock.
A massive shock. The offer from Mintz and Universal was terrible, much lower than he expected. But the real kicker, the devastating part, was realizing that Universal and Winkler Pictures actually held all the commercial rights to Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. He'd signed them away without fully understanding the implications. He had no control over his own creation.
Ouch. That must have stung bad. Okay, so here's where the legend comes in. Walt's on the train, heading back to California, feeling betrayed.
And his mind is already working. How can he bounce back? How can he create something similar enough to leverage their skills, but different enough to avoid Universal's copyright?
And he lands on a mouse.
A mouse. Could still have those round features, be animated in a similar style, but legally distinct from the rabbit. His first idea for a name was Mortimer Mouse.
But someone intervened.
His wife, Lillian. He'd married her back in 1925. She'd actually been working as an ink artist, then secretary at the studio. She apparently heard Mortimer and just said it sounded too pompous. She suggested Mickey Mouse instead. Much catchier, right?
Much better. So he gets back to California. He's got the name, the concept.
But crucially, it's Ub Iwerks who sits down and draws Mickey Mouse as we recognize him today. Those iconic simple circles, the whole design, Walt conceived, Iwerks executed.
Their first Mickey short, Plain Crazy, didn't actually do very well, though, did it?
No, it was a silent film initially, and it failed to find a distributor, so they had to pivot again.
And the pivot was Steamboat Willie.
Steamboat Willie. Debuted November 1928, and the key was sound. It wasn't the very first cartoon with sound, but it was one of the first and perhaps the most effective to use a fully synchronized soundtrack, music, effects, everything timed perfectly to the end.
Tell us about the film itself. Short, right?
Just under 8 minutes long. Features Mickey as a mischievous deckhand on a paddle steamer, clashing with the Captain Pete, who actually predated Mickey. He was in the Alice comedy. Minnie Mouse makes her debut, too. Ends with Mickey getting punished by having to peel potatoes. Pretty significant for a short back then. Nearly $5,000. But the investment paid off immediately.
How was it received?
It was a sensation. Critically acclaimed, huge commercial hit. It just connected with audience. 12 more Mickey shorts followed in 1929 alone. And if you factor in everything since then, merchandise, theme parks, licensing Mickey Mouse is estimated to have generated something like, almost $200 billion for Disney over nearly a century.
Wow. Just staggering. The birth of the modern entertainment franchise, really.
Absolutely. And that success allowed them to expand immediately. In 1929, they launched a new series alongside Mickey, The Silly Simpsons.
What were those about?
Well, initially they were pretty simple, just short cartoons built around a single piece of music or a song. More about visual gags and experimenting with animation techniques, synchronizing action to music. Later on, they started telling more structured stories. They ended up making 75 of them by 1939.
But this period of growth also saw a major split, didn't it? The partnership with Iwerks didn't last.
No, it didn't. Iwerks left the Disney studio in 1930. It was a major falling out.
Why? What happened?
The sources point primarily to Walt's management style, his, quote, brusque attitude, and critically, his consistent failure to give Iwerks proper public credit for his absolutely fundamental role in designing Mickey and developing their early animation.
So the Oswald experience taught Walt he needed total commercial control.
And maybe the Iwerks split shows he struggled with sharing creative control, or at least the spot, even with someone whose genius was so obviously essential to their success. Iwerks felt undervalued and went off to start his own studio.
That must have been a blow, losing his top animator and technical guy.
Huge. Though the studio kept pushing forward, and they found a really successful formula with Three Little Pigs in 1933.
Yeah, based on the old fable.
Exactly. This really cemented their strategy of mining public domain, folklore, fairy tales, fables, mostly European ones from the medieval or early modern period, stuff they didn't have to pay royalties for.
And Three Little Pigs was a hit.
An astonishing hit. Cost about $22,000 to make, which was quite a bit for a short then, but it grossed around $250,000. Massive return. It even won the Academy Award for Best Animated Short in 1934.
That must have given Walt enormous confidence. Maybe enough to try something really ambitious.
It certainly seems that way, because his next big idea was, well, almost unthinkable at the time. A full-length, feature-animated film.
Something no one had ever successfully done before.
Right. Hollywood was skeptical, to say the least. People called it Disney's folly. They thought audiences wouldn't sit through an hour-plus cartoon, that it would bankrupt.
Did he consider other stories first?
He did. Apparently, he kicked around ideas like adapting Homer's Iliad or Odyssey, or maybe Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels. But he eventually settled on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Based on the brothers' Grimm fairy tale, 1912. A huge gamble.
Enormous. The budget spiraled. But when it was released in December 1937, it wasn't folly at all. It was an absolute runaway success. It grossed over $8 million by 1938 alone, which was just astronomical money back. If you adjust for inflation, it remained the highest grossing animated film ever made until Aladdin came out decades later in 1993.
And the Academy recognized it too, didn't they? In a unique way.
They did. In 1939, they gave Walt a special honorary Oscar. It was one standard-sized statuette, presented alongside 7 perfectly crafted miniature Oscars, acknowledging the film and its 7 dwarf characters. Just cemented his status as a true Hollywood pioneer.
While all this professional triumph is happening, though, let's look at his personal life during this time. Things weren't quite so smooth with his wife, Lillian.
No, they weren't. The sources indicate they struggled significantly to conceive children. This apparently caused immense strain. There are reports that Walt suffered something described as a borderline nervous breakdown around 1931, possibly linked to this stress.
Did they eventually have children?
Yes. After several difficult miscarriages, their daughter Diane was born in December 1933. Then, in 1936, they adopted a second daughter, Sharon, just a few weeks after she was born. Though, interestingly, they presented Sharon to the public as if she were their biological child.
That's interesting. And what was Walt like as a father, based on the source? The man building this family entertainment.
Often quite distant, it seems. A workaholic, obviously. He famously retreated into his hobbies, particularly his elaborate model train setup. He had this enormous, nearly half-mile-long miniature railway track built in a special room and later around the grounds of their Holmby Hills mansion.
A world he could control completely, perhaps.
Perhaps. It's telling, though, that later at Disneyland, he named one of the park's original steam trains the Lily Belle, as a nod to Lillian's role in naming Mickey Mouse all those years ago. A small public acknowledgement, maybe.
Now 1938, the year Snow White is conquering the world. But it was also a year marked by some really dark events for Walt, personally and politically.
Deeply traumatic, yes. First, the tragedy involving his mother, Flora.
What happened?
Walt and Roy had recently bought a new house for their parents in North Hollywood. But tragically, on November 26, 1938, Flora died from carbon monoxide poisoning. There was a faulty furnace in the house.
Oh, how awful. And his father.
Elias, Walt's father, was also overcome, but he survived. He recovered physically, but the sources suggest the emotional fallout was there was a serious rift between Elias and Walt after, possibly with Elias blaming Walt or house for Flora's death.
That's terrible guilt to carry. Did it affect Walt long term?
People close to him said it did, that it contributed to a harder edge in his personality from that point. He actually missed his own father when Elias died later in 1991. And some critics even speculate that this trauma is reflected in the frequent or early death of mother figures in sub-films.
And then, just weeks after his mother's death, in December 1938, comes this really controversial incident, the Leni Riefenstahl.
Yes, highly contested. Leni Riefenstahl, infamous by then as the director of Nazi propaganda masterpieces like Triumph of the Will and Olympia, was given a tour of the...
And this was just weeks after Kristall, the horrific anti-Jewish pogroms across Germany. The timing is awful.
Absolutely. The official Disney company line, then and now, is that they were unaware Riefenstahl herself would be part of the German delegation visiting that day, and that Walt wouldn't have allowed it had he known.
But that's disputed.
Heavily. Our sources point to alternative theories suggesting Walt might have been perfectly aware who she was and possibly even hated himself.
Why would he do? Especially given the political climate.
The speculation centers on pragmatism, perhaps overriding moral. One theory is he wanted to ensure his films could still be distributed in Germany and across Nazi-controlled Europe. Another suggests he was trying to collect a significant debt owed to the studio by its German film distributor. It raises difficult questions about his priorities, business versus politics.
A very murky episode. Okay, moving past Snow White, the next big animated feature was Pinocchio in 1940. And this film really brings up that recurring criticism of Disney, doesn't it? The sanitization issue.
It's a prime example. The film is based on Carlo Collodi's Italian novel from 1883, The Adventures of Pinocchio.
And the original book is quite different from the Disney.
Oh, radically different. Collodi's novel was actually a pretty dark, biting satire of 19th century European society, poverty, and the harsh realities of industrialization. And the character of Pinocchio himself. He's not the naive...
How so? Give us the specifics.
Well, for starters, in the book, when the talking cricket, who isn't even named Jiminy, tries to give Pinocchio some advice early on, Pinocchio gets annoyed and kills him by throwing a hammer at him.
Wow. Okay, definitely not the Disney version.
Not at all. The book's Pinocchio is often selfish, lazy, disobedient. He sells the school books his desperately poor father Geppetto bought for him to go see a puppet show. He lies constantly. Collodi used him to make points about education, responsibility.
Whereas Disney's version.
Disney completely sanitized the story, as critics put it. He turned Pinocchio into a fundamentally good, albeit easily misled, character whose main goal is to become a real. And Jiminy Cricket becomes his charming, singing conscience and best friend. All the sharp social critique is gone, replaced by sentimentality.
Was Pinocchio successful?
Critically, yes. It won 2 Academy Awards for its music. When You Wish Upon a Star became iconic. But commercially, it was initially a failure. A big part of that was timing. World War II had just broken out in Europe, cutting off huge overseas markets for Disney.
And that commercial fail, combined with the escalating costs of another hugely ambitious project, created serious financial problems for the studio, didn't it?
It absolutely did. The financial disruption from the war hitting right when Pinocchio failed costs, plus the money pouring into Fantasia, it put the company in a really tight spot.
And that financial pressure led directly to major labor problems.
Yeah. Disney was planning an over-the-counter share sale in March 1940 to raise capital. To make the company look attractive to investors, they needed to demonstrate financial that meant cost-cutting and pressure on the workforce.
How did the staff react?
They were already unhappy. Many felt they were underpaid, especially given the success of Snow White. They resented the lack of screen credit for their creative work. And a major issue was being forced to sign documents claiming they worked a standard 40-hour week, when in reality, Walt's demanding schedules often meant much longer hours, unpaid overtime.
So tensions were high.
Very high. And it all boiled over in May 1941 with the Disney Animators strike. It lasted 4 long months and was predator.
Had Walt handle it?
Badly at first. He took it very personally, saw it as a betrayal. His initial reaction was quite heavy-handed, trying to intimidate the strikers. But eventually, under pressure from mediators and the unions, he was forced to negotiate.
What was the outcome?
Had to concede. The studio recognized the union, improved pay and working conditions, and started implementing screen credits more fairly. But it was a definite defeat for a blow to his authority, and it soured his relationship with many of his artists for years.
Interestingly, though, around the same time, 1940, Iwerks actually came back to the studio, didn't he, after leaving a decade earlier?
He did. They reconciled, at least professionally. Iwerks returned and worked on special effects and technical development for many major Disney projects over the next few decades. Maybe a sign that Walt realized he needed Iwerks' genius, or perhaps Iwerks' own studio hadn't been as successful as he'd hoped.
Now, the other big film from this difficult period was Fantasia, also released in 1940. You mentioned its costs contributed to the financials.
Huge. Fantasia was Walt's big artistic gamble. It actually started life as a relatively modest idea. A special silly symphony short featuring Mickey Mouse in The Sorcerer's Apprentice, based on that Goethe poem from 1797.
But it grew into something much bigger.
Much bigger and much more expensive. Walt got increasingly ambitious about it. He envisioned a feature-length concert film combining high-quality animation with classical music masterpieces.
So not your typical cartoon fare.
Definitely not. It was conceived as highbrow entertainment. Segments animated to works by Bach, Tchaikovsky, Stravinsky, Beethoven, all performed by the prestigious Philadelphia Orchestra under the famous conductor Leopold Stokowski. It was incredibly innovative, technically complex, featuring things like stereophonic sound, which they called Fantasound.
And the cost.
It soared to around $2.3 million, an astronomical sum for an animated film back then.
How did it do?
Critically, it's now seen as a landmark, a masterpiece of animation. It received 2 honorary Academy Awards for its technical achievements in sound and visuals, but commercially. Initially, it was another box office disappointment. High cost, the need for special sound equipment in theaters, and again, the war cutting off the market. It lost a lot of money.
So multiple financial blows, labor strife. The studio must have been really struggling when the U.S. entered World War II.
Desperately. After Pearl Harbor in December 1941, the regular movie business was disrupted, and the studio was carrying significant debt. Walt essentially had to pivot the entire operation towards the war effort to survive. Almost immediately, the military moved. Hundreds of U.S. soldiers were actually stationed right there at the Disney studio lot in Burbank for a time.
Why?
To protect the nearby Lockheed aircraft plant, which was considered a vital defense facility and a potential target. But more significantly for the studio's survival, Disney started aggressively pursuing government contracts.
Making films for the military.
Exactly. They produced hundreds of films during the war training films for sailors and pilots, health information films, and of course propaganda films designed to boost morale and support the war effort.
And this is where Donald Duck really came into his own, wasn't it? Not Mickey.
That's right. Donald Duck, who'd first appeared back in 1934 with his distinctive, fiery temper, became the perfect face for wartime Disney. He starred in many of the propaganda shows. The most famous is probably Der Fuhrer's face from 1993.
What happens in that one?
It shows Donald having a nightmare where he's living in Naziland, obviously Nazi Germany suffering under tyranny, forced labor, meager rations, and constantly having to salute portraits of Hitler. It ends with him waking up relieved and grateful to be in America. Powerful stuff, actually.
And it won an Oscar, didn't it?
It did. Best Animated Short Film. Shows how fully Disney embraced the propaganda role.
During the war, they also released a couple of animated features that had already been in the works, right? Dumbo and Bambi?
Yes. Dumbo came out in 1941. It was deliberately made on a much smaller scale and budget than Pinocchio or Fantasia, only 64 minutes long, precisely to cut costs and hopefully turn a quick profit, which it did.
And Bambi. They came out in 1942.
Bambi followed in 1942, based on the 1923 novel by Austrian author Felix Salten. Beautiful animation. Technically brilliant, but this film often comes up again in discussions about Disney's approach to source.
Because the original novel had a deeper meaning.
A much darker allegory. Sultan was Jewish, writing in Austria in the 1920s amidst rising, and many critics interpret the original Bambi novel as an allegory about the persecution and vulnerability in Europe. The forest is a dangerous place. He, man, represents the threat.
But the Disney film doesn't really touch that, does it?
Not explicitly, no. Disney's Bambi focuses on the circle of life, the loss of innocence, the beauty and danger of nature. It's visually stunning and emotionally affecting, particularly the death of Bambi's mother, but the specific political allegory of Sultan's original largely out. It fits that pattern critics call sanitize or dumbing down for mass.
Okay, let's shift focus a bit to Walt himself during this period and beyond. We've talked about his drive, his ambition. What was he like as a person, as a boss, day to day?
Well, he built an empire and amassed a huge personal fortune worth around $100 million when he died, which would make him a billionaire today. But the picture painted by many sources of a very
How so?
often distant, apparently quite unemotional in his dealing. A complete workaholic, obviously. And he set incredibly high standards for everyone working for him.
Not much praise then.
Very little. Staff often said the best you could hope for was that he didn't criticize your work. Getting actual praise was rare. A simple "that works" was apparently high praise from Walt.
What about his relationship with his brother Roy? Roy was there from the very beginning, handling the finances, keeping the company afloat.
Their relationship could be incredibly strained. Sources describe Walt's treatment of Roy as appalling on occasions. He often publicly minimized Roy's crucial role, sometimes dismissively referring to him as just the company accountant rather than his partner and the financial director. It seems tied to Walt's need to be seen as the sole vision.
But he could show loyalty, too.
Yes, it wasn't all negative. He had a famous temper, could fly off the handle, but later in his career, especially once the company was more secure, he could also be quite loyal to talented staff he trusted, offering decent bonuses and opportunities. He was complex.
And politically, after the war, he became quite active, didn't he? Particularly during the Red Scare.
Oh, very much so. Walt was a fervent anti-communist. Even back during the 1941 Animators strike, he'd publicly blamed it on communist agitators trying to infiltrate his studio. He wrote a piece about it in Variety mag.
And he helped form an organization for this.
Yes, in 1944, he was one of the co-founders of the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals, or the MPA. Its stated goal was basically to protect Hollywood from communist and fascist, though its focus quickly became almost entirely anti-communist.
This led to his involvement with the House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC.
It did. HUAC was that congressional committee doing highly publicized, often controversial investigations into alleged communist infiltration in various sectors of American life, especially Hollywood.
And Disney testified.
Yes. In October 1947, Walt appeared before HUAC as a friendly witness. He testified alongside other prominent Hollywood conservatives, including future President Ronald Reagan.
What did he say?
He spoke about his belief that communists had instigated the 1941 strike, and he named several individuals, former employees, union organizers, suspected of being communist sympathizers. It was a very public declaration of his political stance and definitely contributed to the climate of fear and blacklist in Hollywood.
He even had ties to the FBI.
He did. He served as an FBI special agent contact for many years, starting in the 1940s. The exact nature of this relationship is debated, but it seems primarily related to him providing information, particularly for ed or government. It cemented his image as a staunch establisher during.
Okay, so post-war, despite the controversies, the company itself must have been on a more solid footing financially.
Yes, the war contracts had helped state. They still had millions in debt immediately after the war, but the Bank of America, their longtime backer, recognized the underlying strength of the Disney brand and asset and provided relief.
Did they jump right back into big animated features?
Not immediately. There was a period in the late 40s where they focused more on package films, collections of shorts bundled together, and also started producing live-action nature documentaries, like the True Life Adventures series. These were relatively cheap to make and quite profitable.
The animated magic returned in the 50s?
Oh, absolutely. The early 1950s saw a string of huge animated hits that really cemented the classic Disney style. Cinderella in 1950, Alice in Wonderland in 1951, and Peter Pan in 1993. A golden age, really.
And alongside the movies, Walt made a truly visionary move into a completely new medium that was just starting to take off.
Television. He saw its potential immediately, much earlier than many other Hollywood, which initially viewed TV as a threat.
How did he embrace it?
Most famously with the Mickey Mouse Club. It launched in 1955 and ran daily until featuring those iconic kid performers, the Mouseketeers, singing, dancing short cartoons. It brought the Disney brand directly into American homes every day.
An incredible marketing tool.
Unbelievably effective. It created generations of kids who grew up with Disney as a daily presence. And of course, that format later launched huge stars in its various revivals. Britney Spears, Justin Timberlake, Ryan Gosling, they were all Mouseketeers. The dedicated Disney Channel cable network came much later, in 1983.
But the biggest, most monumental project of the 1950s wasn't on screen, was physical Disneyland.
Disneyland. The ultimate dream project for Walt in that era. The idea had been percolating for a long time, apparently since the early 1940s.
Where did the initial idea come from?
It partly stemmed from people constantly wanting to visit the Disney studio in Burbank, which wasn't really set up for tours. It was a working studio. But it got Walt thinking about creating a dedicated space, somewhere families, parents, and children could go and have fun together. Something different from traditional amusement parks. Cleaner, more themed, more immersive.
He didn't build it right next to the studio, though.
Yeah. No. He initially considered a small park, maybe called Mickey Mouse Park, on land near the Burbank studio. But his vision quickly grew much, much bigger. He realized he needed a huge, undeveloped plot of land.
And he found it in Anaheim.
Down in Orange County, California, yeah. He bought a 160-acre orange grove near Anaheim, and that's where Disneyland was built. It opened in July 1955.
With the famous Sleeping Beauty castle at its heart.
Modeled, interestingly, on Neuschwanstein Castle, that fairy tale-like 19th century palace built by King Ludwig II in Bavaria, Germany.
The opening day itself wasn't exactly smooth sailing, though, was it?
Famously disastrous, actually. It was incredibly hot. The freshly poured asphalt on Main Street apparently started melting, sticking to people's shoes. Rides broke down. Food ran out. It was chaos, broadcast live on television.
But it recovered quickly.
Very quickly. Despite the rough start, the concept was just so powerful, so appealing. It became an immediate, massive success, a genuine cultural phenomenon almost overnight.
So much so that even world leaders wanted to see it.
Yeah, the famous story about Nikita Khrushchev, the Soviet premier. During his state visit to the U.S. in 1959, he specifically requested a trip to Disneyland.
They said no?
His security detail did. They couldn't guarantee his safety in the crowds, apparently. Khrushchev was furious. He launched into this angry public tirade about it, calling the refusal inconceivable. It just shows what a potent symbol of American culture and capitalism Disneyland had already become just 4 years after opening.
Meanwhile, the film studio kept going strong through the late 50s and early 60s.
Absolutely. More animated hits like Lady and the Tramp in 1955, based on a more recent 1945 story, actually. Then Sleeping Beauty in 1959, visually stunning but very expensive, based on the old Perrault fairy tale in 1997. And 101 Dalmatians in 1961, which used new Xerox animation to save money.
But then in 1964 came a really major departure for the studio, didn't it? A huge live-action success.
Mary Poppins, that was the one. Not just live action, but a full-blown musical comedy, blending live actors with animation sequences.
Starring Julie Andrews and Dick Van Dyke.
An absolutely iconic pairing. The film was enormous. It was the highest-grossing film worldwide in 1964, pulling in something like $100 million. Just staggering for the mid...
And critically acclaimed, too.
Huge. Nominated for Best Picture, won 5 Oscars, including Best Actress for Julie Andrews, Best Visual Effects, Best Original Song for Chim Chim Cherry. It really proved what could translate his magic touch beyond animation into blockbuster live-action filmmaking. It's arguably his most successful live-action film ever. But even with all that success, Disneyland booming, Mary Poppins, conquering the box office Walt's focus, was already shifting towards his next and perhaps grandest, most ambitious, maybe even most autocratic vision.
EPCOT.
EPCOT, the experimental prototype community of tomorrow. This became his obsession in the early 90s, and it wasn't just another theme park.
No, this is supposed to be a real functioning city.
A futuristic, utopian city. He started secretly buying up vast amounts of land in Central Florida, near Orlando, over 27,000 acres.
That's huge. How big is that compared to something we know?
It's roughly twice the physical size of the island of Manhattan. Just enormous.
And what was the vision for this land?
The plan was for a perfectly designed, planned community, maybe enclosed under a dome, maybe not. It would feature cutting-edge technology in homes and transportation, a monorail system for public transit, a central hub with hotels and convention centers, green belts separating zones, residential areas, constantly evolving with the latest.
Sounds incredibly ambitious. But there was a catch, wasn't there? Something fundamental about how this city would be run.
A huge catch, and very revealing about Walt's mindset. By EPCOT was not going to be a democracy.
Not a democracy. How would it be governed then?
Walt Disney himself, and by extension the Disney Company, would effectively be the ruler. They would make all the decisions, control everything, ensuring the city functioned perfectly according to their... It was literally conceived as a city run like a private corporation without the messiness of voting or politics, government as a business enterprise.
That's quite a vision. The ultimate control fantasy, maybe.
It certainly seems like the ultimate expression of his lifelong desire for control, scaled up from a studio to an entire urban environment.
Did any of it get built as he envisioned?
Not the utopian city itself. Walt died in 1966 before construction really got underway on that specific concept. His brother Roy took over and focused on completing the first phase, which was the theme park, the Magic Kingdom, and the surrounding resort, which opened in 1971 as Walt.
But the EPCP name lived on.
It did. The second theme park, built at Walt Disney World, which opened in 1980, was named EPCOT Center. It incorporated some of the futuristic themes and international pavilions from Walt's ideas, but it's fundamentally a theme park, not the functioning autocratic.
Still, the legacy of that Florida project is immense.
Colossal. Walt Disney World is now the most visited vacation resort on the planet. And remarkably, it's the largest single-site employer in the entire United States, something like 77,000 employees, all stemming from that land acquisition.
Let's turn now to Walt's final year. It's kind of ironic, isn't it? The man who built this empire based on wholesome family entertainment lived a pretty unhealthy life himself.
Very unhealthy in one key respect. He was a lifelong heavy smoke, chain smoke, often unfiltered cigarettes for decades.
And it caught up with him.
It did. In late 1966, he was diagnosed with advanced lung cancer. It was terminal. He died just a few weeks later on December 15th, 1966. He'd only turned 65 about 10 days early.
Did he have any projects still in the works?
His last personally supervised animated feature, The Jungle Book, was released posthumously in 1997. Another adaptation this time of Kipling that also faced some criticism for, simplifying and sanitizing the source material.
But his impact, his awards record, it's unparalleled.
Completely. In his lifetime, he oversaw the production of over 80 feature films, hundreds and hundreds of shorts, and his Academy Award record is just untouchable.
How many did he win?
He holds the all-time record for the most nominations for an individual, 59, and the most competitive Oscar wins, 20. Plus, he received 4 honorary Oscars, including the special ones for creating Mickey Mouse and for Snow White. So 26 Oscars in total, nobody else.
After his death, his brother
Roy Disney Sr. took over leadership, saw through the opening of Walt Disney World in 1971, fulfilling Walt's final big project before passing away himself.
And the company just continued to grow.
Phenomenally. It embraced home video in the 1980s, launched the Disney Channel in 83, opened international theme parks in Tokyo, then Paris. They had ups and downs, but kept innovating.
And more film breakthroughs, too, even after Walt.
Absolutely. Things like Splash in 1984 showed they could do successful live-action comedies under their Touchstone Pictures. Then came the Disney Renaissance in animation with films like The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, Lion, and Toy Story in 1995.
The first fully computer-animated feature film.
A huge technological leap produced with Pixar. It marked a whole new era, ironically moving away from the hand-drawn animation Walt pioneered, but carrying on his spirit of innovation.
And today the company's scale is just mind-boggling.
It's one of the absolute giants, consistently ranked among the big 3 global entertainment conglomerates, alongside Comcast and Sony, especially after those massive acquisitions and buying Marvel Entertainment in 2009, then Lucasfilm, which gave them the entire Star Wars universe in 2000.
So bringing this all together.
Yeah.
How do we sum up Walt Disney? He left this unbelievable world change, a true vision.
Undeniable. He created characters and worlds that are embedded in global culture, defining childhood for billions, produced genuine master, pioneered new forms of entertainment.
But the sources we've looked at paint a much more complex picture too, don't they? The man behind the magic wasn't always magical himself.
Not at all. There's the difficult personality, the demanding, sometimes harsh treatment of collaborators, even his own brother, the temper, the controversial political activities during the Red Scare.
And that recurring critique about sanitization, about taking complex literature or folklore, Pinocchio, Bambi, Jungle Book, and stripping away the original edge or commentary to create something smoother, safer, more commercially palatable.
Exactly. That debate about whether he elevated popular culture or in some ways dumbed it down by prioritizing sentimentality and broad appeal, that's a core part of his legacy.
So he was this bundle of contradictions. Creative genius, relentless innovator, tough businessman, political activist, visionary builder, sometimes deeply flawed man.
Driven by this incredible ambition and this almost obsessive need for control, whether it was over an animation cell, a movie studio, a theme park, or even conceptually an entire...
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener. Considering everything, the immense creative legacy, the joy his work brought to millions, the technological and entertainment empires he built, does that ultimately outweigh the difficult, complicated, sometimes controversial aspects of the man himself? Tough question, isn't it?
It really is. Something to ponder.